You know, we may need more. We may need a couple more. I think. I'm gonna pass them out and then here, yeah. You wanted to take, but I need some. Okay. We just shut the door out in the back. Okay, I'm passing out the sheets. We need, I think, a couple more. So if in the meantime, till we get more, everyone can just share for now. Okay, a couple of sort of housekeeping announcements. First of all, I mentioned at the outset of this that my goal really in all of this is to get people to become critical thinkers and critical readers of the text. I don't want, this is not about analyzing the sort of narrative, fictionalized narrative component. It's about teaching people to be able to see things in the text. So the way I structured the classes is that we're going to do, today is going to be a little different because today I actually have two shorter components, which usually it's not going to be like that. Usually it'll be like one longer one, and then there's going to be some chavruta time, and then we'll get back together and discuss it. If there is, I know last week, some people were loving the chavruta, some people were not as much. We could find a balance for that. I personally think chavruta time is important. I think it's very easy to sit and listen to me talk. But at the end of the day, first of all, if you want to really learn to become critical thinkers of the text and also remember what you're learning, I think doing it a little bit, separating into groups and trying to find the answers yourselves is more, I think it's more effective long-term. But again, it's a work in progress. So if it's really something that people are finding is not working for them, you'll let me know and we can always readjust. So what I want to do today is twofold. We have two shorter, which is, again, it's not usually going to be like this, but they're photocopying. We are doing two shorter chapters. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read it. We're going to break up into chavruta time, regroup, and then we'll do the second one. Now, you might remember last class, we talked a lot about humanity, and we talked about the questions Tanakh asks, or the questions, I should say more correctly, that Tanakh is answering. Questions human beings are, I would say, sort of plagued by, or what we might call the perennial questions human beings are always going to be asking. And we looked at how the creation narratives in the very beginning, the stories of how the world was created, why the world, or not why the world was created, but why humanity was put into this earth, and then the banishment from Gan Eden, how that answers some of those really critical questions. And we talked about the potential of humanity. And one of the things we came to when we talked about this Tov business is that humanity outside of Gan Eden has the potential to be fully human, to engage its creativity, to partner with God in keeping the world not just functioning, but to sort of keep progress as part of the human experience. But we said that by definition, that entails on some level suffering, right? We said that humanity in his creative, in his use of creativity and can find a vaccine to prevent an epidemic from spreading or the cure for cancer, but he can also build the atom bomb, right? And he can also build weapons of mass destruction, and he can also, so we said that that's always the sort of balance that we're looking at when we're talking about humanity. And still, Bereshit Gimel contends, if given the choice, humanity will always choose to be fully human and mortal over being essentially like the animal kingdom and live forever. Okay, that was what we sort of understood from Bereshit. Now, what Chava moves to next, and these are the last two chapters where she's actually Chava as Chava. After this, she's going to start interacting with Sarah and with Rivka and then with the women in Mitzrayim, and she's going to really move beyond this sort of primordial phase in human development. But here she's still reflecting on what I would call the ramifications of human creativity and free choice. And she's reflecting on violence. So we have two very short chapters, but I think they're really, really important before we move into these specific chapters about Israel, because we're always used to thinking about Tanakh as specific to us and Israel and what the Torah wants us as people to know. But the Torah has 11 full chapters where it's speaking to humanity wholesale, where it's not to Abraham and his children, but it's to Adam Harishon and all of his children. So I want to look here very, very quickly. I'm going to read through it, and then you're going to do what you did last week, which is break up into smaller groups, follow the questions, and then we're going to reconvene, okay? Okay. They're bringing them in. So just for now, if people can double up. Okay. Adat, Sila, he barks their names and they scramble terrified. They're right to be scared. He just returned from a hunt and the rush of the kill is still coursing through his veins. His adrenaline is dangerous. They know that. They've become adept at anticipating his moods. His name is Lamech, and he is Cain's great-great-great-grandson. He barrels towards them now, but he spotted them. Sila squeezes Ada's hands. They are two wives bound by violence. When he gets close enough, he grabs at them and pulls them both in towards his thick body. His fist digs into Ada's ribs. She winces, but she doesn't move. His smell makes them both sick. When he's had his fill, he shoves them away. Sila trips on a rock, landing on her elbow, but she gets up quickly. Listen, he barks. There's something I want that he wants them to hear, a chant he has written. They are relieved for the moment. All he wants is their adoring glances, which they know well enough, how to feign well enough. I've slain a man for wounding me and a lad for bruising me. If Cain is avenged sevenfold, then Lamech 77-fold. Lamech has killed more than game this morning, and he has come home to boast. I hear his words where I stand in the bushes, and now I too am sickened. Cain was given a sign by God after he killed my beloved Abel. He was scared after his punishment was decreed that others would try to avenge Abel's death. So God gave Cain a sign to curtail the human impulse to exact vengeance. Cain's sign granted him immunity, not from the violence he committed, but from the unbridled cyclical retaliations that would arise from it. But Cain's sign has been misunderstood and perverted by Lamech. Lamech, this beast of a man, 5 generations into human history, knows nothing about the mark of Cain. My Cain, your birth was painful as God said it would be. It was also exhilarating. In the name I chose for you, I tried to encapsulate partnership with God, of working in tandem with him in the creation of new life. And I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. That's the power we name givers have. We imprint our stories onto budding lives that are then unwittingly laden with ideologies and expectations. I know now that those lives don't always yield. You were jealous of Abel. Jealousy is where most hatreds start. You could have chosen to coexist, but you chose instead to rid the world of your brother's existence. It was a cowardly choice and always will be. Your name signals the perpetuation of human life, but your act speaks to humanity's ability to obliterate itself. And now, my Cain, you roam from one frontier to the next. You are married and have children, but that makes no difference. You are alone and always will be. God declared that as well. You will be utterly and eternally alone. You pace even when you have nowhere to go. Your concave body is always moving. You hunger but not for food. You build a city even. It is the first city humanity has ever seen. And you name it for your son, Enoch. And then, Cain, you gather all the people you love into one space and build a wall around them to keep them safe. You know firsthand what humans can do to one another, so you try to keep yours safe. Humanity will always make the mistake of thinking wall can protect them from themselves. Am I my brother's keeper, you asked? Your question will shape civilizations. But God didn't answer you, Cain, the land did. The land had no choice but to lick Abel's lifeblood from your hands, answered you in its refusal of you. You see, this earth we inhabit rejects depravity. It wants to partner with you in your creative acts and sustain those you bring into the world. You were supposed to be interdependent. You were supposed to cultivate the land, and it was supposed to propagate for you. But you rejected your calling as a human being, so the land rejected you. Now, you toil by the sweat of your brow as your father did, but the land remains inert, and you wander endlessly, searching for some place to sustain you. Cain, you run from men and you hide from God, but always pay attention first and foremost to nature. She is your guide. Her reception or rejection of you will always indicate whether you are honoring your human potential. It has been hundreds of years since I held Cain in my arms, and now after all this time, I hold my new son. After centuries of watching men being born, I am a new mother once again. I hold my third child in my arms and remember Abel this small. I try to sing to my new son, but Lamech's song interferes. The simulated smiles of Ada and Sila interfere. I try to sing, but all I see is the terror in their eyes and the young victims of Lamech's brutality. Generations have emerged since my first 2 sons. The world is slowly filling. Something haunts my lullabies. Cain was afforded protection by God himself, but Lamech, that beast of a man, has mistaken Cain's mark for a badge of strength and God's compassion as a license to kill. Lamech invokes Cain's name in an imagined competition of virility. The distortion is both vile and toxic. I try again to sing to my third son, but again, Lamech's song interrupts me. How quickly, I wonder, the bile rising in my throat before carnage becomes a sport. This must be stopped before it spirals out of control. The world needs clarity. Violence needs a name. My own son killed his brother, and no one, not even God himself, called it what it was. So I hold my third son up for the world to see, and once again, as I name him Seth, I tell a story. God has provided me with another offspring in place of Abel, I declare, for Cain had killed him. Murder has been labeled, and it has been arbitrated. I hope the clarity will resound, illuminate, and amend. I hope it will prevent more violence, the cycle of it. But hope, I know, it will guarantee. Okay? So what I want you to do now is we're going to read Perek Dalet. Okay? Perek Dalet, if you remember Perek Gimel, they get kicked out of Gan Eden, and at the end of Perek Gimel, the Kruvim are put in place to guard the entrance to Gan Eden. Perek Dalet tells the episode of Cain killing Hevel. I'll get Tanakh in 1 second. Let me just by way of intro. Perek Dalet is the story of Cain killing Hevel. Okay. The one thing I need you to do temporarily is to put into, not to forget, because they're very, very important midrashim, but just put into the recycle bin just for a tiny bit. You'll go back to them and open the bin after class. But for now, you're going to temporarily, okay, put on the side any notions that Cain brought a bad korban, and that's why Hashem didn't like him. You're going to put aside any notions, anything that you have where the midrashim fill in the ellipses, you want to temporarily put on the side and read the text for what it is. Okay, and what we're looking for here is, what does Chava see in the universe that she is reacting to, that she feels needs to be spoken about? Okay, and the questions will guide you also, but you want to look inside and see what is happening when Cain kills Hevel. Who is reacting? Is there punishment there? Is there just consequences? Look inside, and I'm going to come around. No, it shouldn't be on. Okay, what are we supposed to know that?
Then what happened? Oh, really? Because it says there's nothing. You have first working in the ground. When you work the land will I love it. That's why I'm here. What sort of community is
Okay, we're gonna, in 2 minutes, we're gonna regroup here, so just finish up whatever you're up to. Okay. Okay, guys, we're gonna regroup. Okay, guys, let's bring it back. Here we go. She's from Long Island. Okay, so let's regroup here for a second. Let's talk a little bit about Cain and Hevel. First of all, I'm going to ask some trick questions. I'm giving you the spoiler. Okay. Why did we have two sons? One is a farmer and one is a shepherd. And first, the farmer brings an offering to God, and then the shepherd brings an offering to God, right? By the way, in and of itself, there's something important about the fact that the very first act we see human beings doing outside of the garden is reaching up, right? Is sort of trying to generate a relationship with something other, right, greater than themselves, to connect to God, right? So God, the idea of religion, or whatever you want to call it, spirituality, worshiping God, it's not a top-down thing. God never commands korbanot. Humanity is always trying to connect to something larger than themselves. So you have the farmer brings his offering, and then the shepherd brings his offering. And what does God do? He accepts one and rejects the other. Why? Right, or why? Okay, so it's good, it's quiet, because the Tanakh does not tell us, right? The Mefarshim, this is an example of a place where Mefarshim will fill in the ellipses, that, oh, because it says, wrote so no, so he brought the best, and Cain just brought. But what all of those Mefarshim are trying to do is answer the question of why. It's trying to make sense of something that is left unsaid in the text. But what if the text is leaving it unsaid because Tanakh ultimately, right, this is the archetype, but Tanakh ultimately doesn't explain why some people or some nations are chosen. When Hashem says to Abraham, Lech lecha me'aretzecha mimoladetcha, we aren't given a reason why he chooses Abraham and not Terach. We're not given a reason. Later on, again, because I knew he was a good guy, but chosenness, Tanakh is saying, is something that happens. Explanations are not always given. We're going to get back to it next week, because Chava is going to actually interact with Sarah, who's going to wrestle with this idea when she has to kick Ishmael out. That's something that's very hard, because what it's saying is, in order for there to be a chosen, there needs to be a rejected. And that's not something that's easy to swallow as the chosen ones. Okay, so we're going to get back to that. But chosenness is part and parcel of the human experience. Now, what does Cain do when he feels rejected and jealous, and all, again, of the sort of archetypes that taps into? He kills him. Okay. Now, there's two questions people have always asked about Cain, which are really important. First of all, did Cain know that by however he killed Havel, that it would work? What's the argument that he maybe didn't know that there's such a thing as killing? No human being had died yet. They were able to kill animals, but human beings had not been killed yet. And so perhaps he didn't know what it was. Or what's the other perhaps? Yeah.
Just wondering, because if they know about the trees, there were two trees, they didn't eat from the tree of life. So they ate from the tree of.
So they know that there's something called, so they know, right, there's this sort of awareness of mortality, right? We said that last week. We said it's only when they had Dat Tovara that suddenly they want to eat Tzad Chaim, and Hashem is like, no, that's not for you, right? That's only for the gods, so you have to get out of the garden if you're going to reach for it. But mortality and the ability for one human to kill another is still a different.
What maybe was his aim, maybe not. They said they did sacrifices to Hashem. Could he have been, was he trying to get rid of Abel, or was he trying to sacrifice him?
So no, I don't think he was trying to sacrifice him. It's pretty clear that he wanted to. The question, and I'm going to add on to this question. Let's even argue he knew that he could. Did Cain know that killing? So he had killed animals. Did he know killing was wrong? And we know this for sure. And you can tell me how we know it.
No.
How not?
Because if you're allowed to kill animals for food, then what?
How else? Give me a better
Because he
proof.
didn't say that when he's responding, Hashem says, "Where are you?" He said, "Like, where's your brother?" He said, like, he tried to make excuses already. He knew he'd done something wrong.
So it's possible he knew he did, but did he know before he killed him that murder is wrong? We know for sure the answer is no. How do we know it? Because God had never yet said killing is prohibited. That's what we get to in the next chapter. So harming maybe some, but he did not know that murder is prohibited. Now, the very first act of violence, does Hashem get mad and punish Cain? Does he say, now I'm really mad at you because you did, what happens as a result? I said here it's sort of distinguished.
He just says he can't get work the land anymore.
Okay, why not? We always think, we say, what was Cain's punishment? That he's a wanderer. Is the punishment that he's a wanderer? Why does Cain wander?
Oh, it's a concept. Because somebody else may try. It's like when you have to go to the protected cities if you kill by accident.
So that's what we always think. Oh, so hold on. Irmiklad is really important. We're going to get to that in a second. But that's not why he wanders. The Torah tells us
7 generations of no one can kill it.
we're going to get to that also. But before that, okay.
He needed time to work the land. He had no place
And, okay, so, yes, but we're all thinking from the old model that Hashem says, you're punished and you're gonna be a wanderer.
The land can't
Maybe
be
because he poisoned the land with the blood of his brother.
Okay.
So he could benefit.
Okay, when we think of land, and this is something that's gonna come up a lot of times in Tanakh, we think of land as this like inanimate thing that we just step on it, we stomp on it, we live on it. That's not how the Tanakh describes land. The Adama, we come from the Adama, we return to the Adama. We are meant to work the Adama. We are supposed to have this symbiotic relationship with the land. We work it, it gives to us. That's the nature, right? It sustains us. That's the healthy balance between humanity and the earth, is that we have this healthful relationship. How is it generated? By us being, what's that keyword from last week? Tov. What's Tov? Through Urvu, Mil'u et haaretz, v'kivshuha. We bring life, we sustain it by working the land, we master the earth, we find in the earth all the different solutions to the problems that we have to contend with. That's what human beings are supposed to do. Now, Hevel Kayin does something which is the opposite of Tov. He doesn't help sustain life, he cuts life off. So Hashem doesn't get angry and say, for that reason, you're going to wander. What happens? Hashem says to him, Kol demei achicha tzoakim elai min ha'adama, right? The blood is crying. Asher patzta et pihash. She opened her mouth. Lakachat et mei achicha miyadacha. You said the word poison. It's a perfect word, right? And we read these sentences and we're like, oh, that's such a cute metaphor. Look, they're personifying the earth. But what if Tanakh is being very literal? What if Tanakh is saying the earth is dynamic? The earth, it's not alive in the traditional way we think of it, but the earth reacts to human behavior. By the way, in a very specific sense, we're going to get back to this in later chapters. How do we know the earth reacts to our behaviors? What happens when Israelites misbehave in the land of Israel? What's exile? Again, we're like, oh, cute metaphor. What if it's not a metaphor? What if the land rejects us? What if in this sort of cosmic plane that Tanakh is describing, we are supposed to be interacting with the earth, and when we don't behave tov as human beings, the earth is no longer tov to us in the sense that it sustains us. So, as a result, lo tosef tet kochalach. So you're going to work the land all you want, nothing is going to grow. So as a result, Nava nadia ba'aretz. Why is he wandering? Not because that's his punishment, but just because he's desperately looking for sustenance. Okay, he's a nomad because the earth is not giving to him. Now, it's really interesting. There's a couple of other things along the way before we get to Lemech. Actually, before that, why does Hashem, you mentioned Ir Miklat, Hashem gives him a sign. Right? Cain says, oh my gosh, I can't believe, right? My sin gadol avoni means so. And Hashem gives him a promise. He says, Kol horeg Cain shivatayim yukam. Anyone who kills Cain will be avenged 7 generations, right? So that we don't know, right? But what's the function of the sign? And that's what Chava is reacting to, the fact that Lemech totally misunderstands it. What's the function of the sign? It's a deterrent. Why does God want to deter another killing? What? It's wrong. And also, what if Hevel's kid decides he killed my dad? I'm going to kill him. What? Because then you have this cycle of violence that never ends. Okay, if we think, you mentioned Ir Miklat, that's the perfect parallel. Ir Miklat is essentially a way of saying if there's an accidental death, right? And we know how clans worked in the ancient world. It's all about honor and protecting the honor of the clan. And if God forbid someone even kills someone accidentally, I have to avenge his death. Otherwise, I'm going to look like a weak clan and then I'll be vulnerable. I have to kill the person that accidentally, and then that clan is going to have to kill. And then before you know it, there's tribal warfare, right? And Ir Miklat is the Torah's way of saying, we know you, if you're a good clan, we know you're good brothers, you would kill the guy if you can, but the Torah is saying you don't have to. It's a way of preventing violence from spiraling out of control, right? Now, how does Lemech misunderstand the oath? Hashem gives him an oath, Livilti hakoto to kol motzo. So anyone that finds Cain knows, we're not continuing this. We're not perpetuating it.
He'll get a free pass.
So what does Lemech say? Lemech says,
It's a reward.
it's a reward, and it's even worse than, I would say, than a reward, right? It's It's- literally a license to kill, right? A kid trips over Lemech's foot and he says, and he kills the kid, right? That's what he sings about. He says, I'll find the, right? Let's read the words in the Hebrew. Did you guys see the words in the Hebrew themselves? Right? He says, he eats,
I don't.
he isharakti lefitzive. Wait, let me just find it. Yeled lechaburati, right? It's saying like, oh, in this person, he accidentally knocked into me with his wagon in the supermarket, so I took out a gun and shot him in the head, right? And this person accidentally dented the back of my car.
It's not purpose, he's not talking about on purpose.
It's children, right? Yeled lechaburati, a kid accidentally, I don't know, throws a basketball and it hits him in the shoulder, so he kills it. What Lemech is misunderstanding, he thinks that Cain, by God trying to deter, like you said, right, future violence, that was a license to kill. And he almost talks about Cain as if he's this standard to sort of strive to emulate, right? Now, Chava, it's crazy because, right, we imagine someone says, how many kids did Adam and Chava have? We say 3 kids, but we assume they were pretty much in a row. Right now we're finding out everything happens with Cain and Hevel. In between, in Perek Daled, we find that humanity is becoming really creative and they're inventing musical instruments and they're inventing tools to work the ground. And they're inventing, and Cain in the midst of it all builds what? Why? Because the person who understands what humanity is capable of is the one who's most scared of what humanity is capable of. Right? So he's the first to build a city and he names it for his son because ultimately it's not about protecting ourselves. We're always trying to protect the people we love. Okay. But then all these generations down, something is going wrong with humanity. What's going wrong? Well, correct. But what does Chava see Lemech's song as pointing towards? Right. There has to be a stop. Now, in Chava's interpretation, right? So hundreds of years into human history, she has a 3rd child and she names him Shet. Why? Shatli Elohim Zerak Acher Tachat Harago. But she says Tachat Harago Cain. Why is that important?
Well, that's in place of,
He's a replacement and she's calling Cain.
different generation.
She's calling him a murderer. Right? Now the pasuk says, "Vayakam Cain al Hevel achiv vayahargehu." It's not that we didn't know what happened, but Chava is calling him again. We said that names are so important. In Breshit, Hashem brings all the different animals, and Adam gives names to all of them. Right? Nomenclature, we said, is critical because in order to understand what something is, it needs to be named. God names the Or Yom and the Choshech Kara Laila, so we understand what their function is. Until something is given a name, and this speaks to women and their really ability to utilize language. She gives murder a name by calling it something. Her hope is what? Now it's going to stop. As long as something remains vague, as long as it remains sort of untitled, it can be misconstrued. And what she's hoping, and that's why it's so bizarre, right? Tanakh, hundreds of years later, all of a sudden Chava has a baby. Like Chava's like thousands of years old, but she's having a baby and she's naming it Shet. And she's saying, Kishatli Elohim Zera Acher Tachat Hevel Ki Harago Cain. And her hope is that that's going to stop the cycle of violence. Now, we're going to move on to the next chapter. And I ask you, does that stop the cycle of violence? Is that enough? How do we know it's not enough? Because Vatimalei Haaretz Hamas. God looks down and the world is filled. Now, Hamas, we're not going to write the Mefarshim again, try to define the word literally, but Hamas, we're just going to loosely interpret as chaos. If you remember, Breshit was all about creating order from chaos. You have all of the raw materials in Tohu Vavohu, and then Hashem separates light from darkness and day. So chaos is essentially the undoing of the order, right? That's it says Gneva, right? It says that they were stealing. Right, which makes sense because what? Right. So it's right. So, but again, it's the whole idea is that you can't. Right, stealing is a breakdown in order. It's a breakdown in boundaries between your things, my things, your children. Right. It's that's really disturbing actually if it says the word. I don't. Rashi says chatupim. Thought it was geneva. Gnuvim. I mean chatupim. Really? I thought it was a more modern word, but I could be wrong. Okay. So yeah.
And next
7 generations only for Cain, or shouldn't have been for everybody?
So again, I think it's Cain because again, we have to not think about these stories too literally, right? We're thinking more in terms of what is the Tanakh communicating to us by telling the story the way it is. And what Tanakh is saying is that the first act of violence, God tries to protect it from spiraling out of control, right? That's what we're learning early on. Now, what we find out, and again, this goes back to the hypotheticals. Remember, we said that Tanakh is sort of all about these like hypotheticals. Like, wouldn't that be great if we could just not have to worry about free will, but like life would be amazing? And then we learn, no, that's not fully being human, and you won't actually notice each other, and you're going to end up outside of the garden, right? That's not the ideal. And so you move out. Next week, we're going to talk about another ideal that Bereshit explores. But here, there's almost this, why does God have to tell us what to do anyway? We could figure it out on our own, right? And what we're going to see is that, unfortunately, humanity completely left his own devices. So what I want to do is yeah, quick question.
God says Cain is going to be wandering. Why does he not?
He does.
No, but you can't, if you're wandering around, you can't build a city.
Again, it's the metaphor, right? It's the symbolism of it. He builds we're talking about the origins, right? So we find out about, animal husbandry and musical instruments and metallurgy and all these things. And Cain is the father of city building. It doesn't literally mean that he stayed it's symbolic, right? The sense that
It's his family then, but he's the one.
right. He didn't necessarily live there. He gives it al Shem beno Chanoch, right? His son lived there. So, but again, we're not taking it that literally. It's more symbolically, what are these sort of stories telling us? Okay, so what I want to do now is read a very, very short excerpt, and then we're going to do the pshat inside together, not chavruta, because we're going to try to find the right balance. Here we go. The violence doesn't end with Seth. I mean, the next one, rainbows. And I want you to, again, think where, the whole idea is what I want you to do is think about where she's getting this from, okay? What? The deluge, like, so antediluvian is before the flood, post-diluvian is after the flood. My children struggle to make sense of their place in the world. There's no other creature like them. And that strange space they occupy between the beasts and the gods is eternally disorienting. They want to mingle with angels as they crave flesh. They want to soar through the heavens and gain perspective while they thrive on adventure and the unexpected. They intuit God, but respond to the tangible. They can reflect on their impulses, but sometimes they are overcome by them. I watched their early years. They tried to figure the world out on their own, but they created a mess that had to be washed away. When they started again, they were the same humans on the same earth, but this time, God gave them a rule. He reminded them that they are created in his image, so above all else, they must respect every human being on this earth. Nothing, he made clear as they stepped off the ark, is tantamount to the sanctity of human life. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for in his image did God make man. So simple, just one rule. But if you think about it, all rules stem from this foundational one, and this foundational rule is anchored in humanity's uniqueness. I suspect more rules will follow. I see how my children behave, and it is clear to me that they will need guidelines and ordinances to define the parameters of justice. Those will come in time, I imagine, but for now, I hope my children remember to look at the rainbow, take in its vividness and variations, the sheer magnificence of a spectrum intact, and I hope they remember, before anything else, the value of every human life. Okay, so go to Perek Tet. Everyone open up to Perek Tet very quickly. We only have 10 minutes to do this. Bereshit Tet. We all know what happens before Bereshit Tet, right? We know Vatimalei haaretz chamas, and we know that Hashem picks one man who he believes is deserving of being what Chazal call the second Adam, right? The second Adam from which to create the world. And what? Adam 2. And well, not Rav Soloveitchik's Adam 1 and Adam 2, but and Hashem essentially decides that the world has to be different this time. Okay, the question is, how is it going to be different this time? And so I'm going to read to you just from the beginning of Perek Tet, and it says as follows. And what I want you to do is tell me it's almost like if we weren't concentrating, the beginning of Perek Tet almost feels like the stream of consciousness, right? The flood is over. Actually, I'm going to back up one to the very end of Perek Tet. At the very end of Perek Tet, it says as follows, Pasuk Chaf, okay? Vayiven Noach mizbeach laHashem, vayikach mikol habeima tahora mikol ha'of ha'tahor vaya'al olot b'mizbeach. So the very first thing Noach does after stepping out, or not the very first, but one of the things he does is he brings a korban to Hashem. Okay. Vayarach Hashem et reach hanichoach, vayomer Hashem el libo. Lo osif likalel od et ha'adama ba'avor ha'adam. Ki yetzer lev ha'adam ra min urav. Lo osif od lahakot et kol chai ka'asher asiti. Od kol yemei ha'aretz zera v'katzir v'kor v'chom v'kayetz v'choret v'yom v'layla. Lo ishbotu. Okay, Hashem makes a really harsh statement here. Noach brings a korban and Hashem says, now I know what? Humanity is rak kol hayom. Okay, what? What does that mean? So what does ra mean here? Yes, but we said what? It's the opposite of tov, meaning what? Okay, humanity. So let's put it into sort of bloodlust, right? Humanity is meant to live alongside the animals and frolic with them in the grass and just eat the lettuce for lunch. But what Hashem sees when Noach does this, even after the flood, after all they've lost, is humanity has a penchant for blood, right? They have this desire for blood. Yeah. Yeah, so we're not going to get into that. The whole, right. So there's a lot of times in Tanakh where Hashem is like, oh, look at that. We're not getting into theologically the implications of that. I think it's more, right, we're not questioning God's omniscience. What we're saying is, what we're learning here is sort of, we're watching the progression of humans. Yeah, obviously God knew that man has a penchant because God created us, right? It's not, we're not getting, what? But I don't think Ra doesn't mean man is bad. Ra means
even that thing of like not being able to, that he has a penchant for that he's making that statement. Not like a penny.
But hold up, well, but yes and no, meaning, but what follows the statement makes it a lot less disturbing. What God is saying is, human beings have this thing we call bloodlust, for better or worse, okay? It's why they had the gladiators in Rome. It's why, sorry to football fans, we still watch football and people's brains being mashed up, okay? Humanity has this thing. They see animals and they want to eat the animal. So Hashem doesn't say, oh, forget it, I'm getting rid of man because like that was a bad experiment. And he doesn't say, you can't ever spill a drop of blood. What Hashem does instead, and this goes back to your question, is how we understand why humanity exists in this place of balance. Hashem says as follows. Go to the beginning of Parak Tet, and it's sort of, again, it's almost like this, it almost seems like Hashem's stream of consciousness, but it's not. Each one actually follows logically. Pasuk Aleph, Vayivarech Elokim et Noach vet banav, Vayomer lahem. He reminds them through Urvu mil'u ha'aretz. Right. This is don't forget. This is the first command, and then he says, Umorachem v'chitchem yeh al kol chayat ha'aretz v'al kol of hashamayim b'chol asher tirmos ha'adama u'b'chol degei hayam b'yedchem nitanu. This is the first time Hashem is saying what? You control it, and you can kol remes asher hu chai lachem yihiyeh leochla ki yerek eser natati lachem et kol. Hashem says, I see this about you, human beings. So I am saying, eat the meat. Now hold on. There's sort of a qualifier. Pasuk Dalid. Ach basar b'nafsho damo lo tochelu. You cannot eat it while it's still bleeding. Okay, and then he goes on. Hashem is telling us something which we may not have known, which is Hashem also holds beasts accountable for killing us. Hashem is saying there is accountability. Blood cannot be spilled without accountability. And then he goes on and he says, Shofech dam ha'adam ba'adam damo yishafech. Why is this important? This is the very first what? Prohibition, right? This is the first time Hashem is saying, if you do, with the exception of the trees, but I'm not going to get into that. And then Hashem says, why? Why is murder wrong? Ki b'tzelem Elokim asa et ha'adam. Because you were created, you can't go around killing because the blood of humans is
It's part of me.
correct. Ve'atem, then he reminds them, pru uravu shirtzu ba'aretz uravuba. And I'm not going to go into everything that happens after, but let's just talk very, very quickly for 1 second here. What is it almost, right? It's, if we just read it superficially, it's, they come out of the teva, Noach does this, and Hashem is like, okay, also this, and this. What's the connection? There's a perfectly logical flow in the aftermath of the world becoming completely saturated with violence to the point where Hashem literally, not figuratively, literally lifts the floodgates, water covers the earth, washes it away, and we start again. But starting again doesn't help if the reality this time is not different. So the reality is different for one very, very basic reason. What is it? Okay, there's 2 rules, right? What is the connection between you can eat animals, but you can't eat them if they're bloody, and also you can't kill? What is this? What is Hashem essentially?
Whoever need to kill or you have a bloodlust. Control it, use it within the box and not outside the box, within the rules and not outside.
Okay, what's the connection between you can eat animals, but only if you don't eat them when they're bloody, and only if you don't kill people? But why are they connected? What's the juxtaposition? What? Blood is life. What else?
Yeah, if you're gonna get rid of the blood, it's not that you can go in a moment of passion and kill on it. You have to kill the animal, wait through a process of time, and then it all feels calmer.
Okay, calmer, and I'll use another word, right? More control. There's what Hashem is saying is there's a hierarchy. There's an implicit hierarchy. People are at the top. What? Correct. And if people are at the top, Hashem is essentially saying the only reason or the only reality in which you are allowed to eat animals is if you don't behave like them, right? The hierarchy only exists if human beings don't act on impulse. If you remember last week, we said that the difference between human beings and animals, we all have impulse, is that we don't always act on it. Someone might be eating a sandwich and I might be hungry, but because I'm a human and not an animal, I don't eat that person to then take their sandwich, right? That's the difference. So God, when we come out of the teva, is saying this has to be different this time around. Reality has to be different. And the difference comes down to one very, very basic component. Human life must be honored. That's it. And it's not saying specific human lives, and it's not saying one over the other. Again, we're not getting into this, but in the ancient world, certain people were considered, right, higher caste than others in certain societies. In certain ancient mythologies, there were humans and then demigods and then gods, and they were all in Bereshit. In the Torah, there is one male and one female, and everyone comes from them. And if hierarchy evolves later on, it's based on the people's behaviors, right? Ham and Canaan, that's because Ham did something wrong, and so his child, but there is no one human being that is inherently different than any other. God says in order for you to function as human beings and actually make it work this time around, you need to respect human life. Blood is sanctified. That's it. Okay, and it's a very, very basic component that we sometimes skip over because we're in a rush to get to the story about Noach and his sons, which is interesting in its own right.
The other point where
Yeah.
it says, Lois old Jacob, this is Hashem saying that he's not gonna kill men anymore also, so,
Right, but I think it's contingent, if I'm understanding the flow of the narrative correctly. I think Hashem's statement is contingent on the fact that he realizes there's this bloodlust. He is going to sort of curtail human behavior, and then there won't be a need anymore, because hopefully, if we behave like human beings, Vatimalei haaretz Hamas won't come to fruition again, right? I don't think it's Hashem.
it's still a fellow kid, that's why we can't, you have to be, so he can't do it, either, I mean.
Listen, Hashem, in theory, can do whatever he wants, right? But I think the promise embedded here in the text is saying this time around, things are going to be different. I am not destroying humanity. I recognize humanity's right proclivities. I am therefore going to give prohibitions in order to sort of anchor those proclivities or to curtail them, control them. And once that new reality is set in place, humanity will be in a different place, right? It won't bring upon itself that kind of destruction. Yeah.
I think a little bit unfair to Noah, because if you think about it, is it a bloodlust, or is it that he said, well, I learned from history?
I don't think bloodlust is a bad thing. I'm not saying it as a negative.
accepted, the vegetable sacrifice was not, so I'll bring an animal sacrifice.
Yeah, but I'm not saying it as a bad thing, right? And I don't think it's, right, Ra doesn't mean, I don't think it's a bad thing, even when Hashem says Rak, I don't think Hashem is saying Noach, right? Noach was the only guy that Hashem saved for good reason, right? But I think what it's saying is, we have bloodlust. I don't think it's you're calling it a bad thing, and therefore, by definition, we're not being fair to Noach. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's our nature. That's what Tanakh is saying. But human nature needs to be curtailed. Human nature needs to be bridled. That's the definition of human nature, right? I don't think it's a bad thing. I think if we assume bloodlust is bad, then we're not being fair to Noach. If we assume bloodlust is human, we're being neutral to Noach. He's a human being, and God sees that about him, and therefore puts these prohibitions into place. Yeah.
If you have bloodlust, I learned this many years ago, if you have bloodlust, you can either be a murderer or you can.
So that's the Rambam's,
You
right?
can be a surgeon or a.
So I think the Rambam's expansion on this idea is saying, it's exactly, Rina, going to this point. Human nature is neither good nor bad. Human nature is. And rules are what enable us, right, correct. It's how you channel them. Correct.
How would you define Ra?
I think Ra is the opposite of Tov. If Tov is about bringing and sustaining life, Ra is the opposite of that in the context of Breshit. I don't see it as even here. Yeah, in Breshit. Wow. No. They sacrificed meat. They never ate it. Right. As according, right, as you know, if we take this literally. Okay. All right, ladies, what I might do, I'm trying to figure out the exact balance between chavruta and frontal. If you can maybe I'll make in the office like an informal poll sort of, or we can do what?
We have to tell them.
But not everybody's registered for the class yet. So I'm trying to, what? All right, you know what? Let's do by a show of hands. By a show of hands. There's gonna be some breaking into learning groups because it's just by nature of the class. But do you prefer the way it's been until now, meaning like breaking up into chavruta and then coming back together, or do you prefer more frontal? For chavruta, raise your hands and I'll just. Oh wait, are there 3 options? Tammy says. Hold on, what's the third? Yeah, I could shorten the chavruta time. Yeah, I could shorten the chavruta time. For the
Questions ahead of time that you have, and we just, study, here and I don't know.
So wait, hold on. By a show of hands, let me just get by a show of hands, who likes, I'm gonna do 3 options. Chavruta, I'll do. No, less chavruta. What? Is it? Wait. Okay, or should we wait a little bit and see if you get more used to chavruta? I know, but Bushra is very what? Okay, raising by a show of hands, who enjoys the chavruta, please? 2, 7. And who does not want chavruta as much? Raise your hands. 1, 2, 8, 9, 10. But you don't understand the explanation unless you do this. Yeah, can you pass wait guys, can you pass the stories themselves back in?
Yeah, is the reason you don't do school because of the chavruta?
And also,
Because that could be.
so because I'm paranoid.
So there's going to be, so we're never going to have it for students.
No, I like it a lot. Wait, guys, can you hand back the sheet? Okay, if you burn it, fine. I'm too paranoid to let it out.
You're right, it's brilliant.
I know, but the idea is out there. Yeah. Wait, guys, can you hand back the sources? Hand back, hand back.
I used to,
Um,
I used to write like real fast.
yeah. But I asked my father who Fold is, he explained it to me. It's like my grandmother's first cousin, that's how something. She's related. We're basically.
related to who?
Oh, Lisa's mother.
Well, I was her mother's.
No, it's your first.
So then, we're
So
all,
they-
Okay,
Right?
we all come from.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so it's good.
Exactly.
Great.
I have to figure out the.
No, it was great and I'm glad.
I know, I'm sure it's giving me going crazy because she thinks how to.
Ah.
Well,
I like it. I think.
I think
it's such an unlighting.
Yes, right. Keep
and let them get in front of
I heard say.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. Everybody.
They're not used to that.
Right,